If 6 kingdoms can't stop one, is the problem the enemy or themselves? This is the story of the Vertical Alliance, a rare moment in ancient Chinese history when almost the entire political map stood together against a single rising power, the state of Qin. It looked impressive on paper, it failed in practice, and it failed fast. Today we'll walk through how it was built, why it collapsed, and why history uses it as a cautionary tale about the weakness of coalitions without cohesion. The Warring States period was the geopolitical free-for-all of ancient China. By the 4th century BCE, the old Zhou dynasty's authority was gone. What was left was a competitive landscape of rival kingdoms, each with its own army, economy, and ruling elite, locked in a permanent state of war. There were 7 major powers: Qin in the west, Tu in the south, Qi in the east, Yan in the northeast, and the central states of Han, Zhao, and Wei. Geography mattered. Qin was separated from the others by mountains and rivers, which meant fewer invasions but also fewer distractions. The other 6 were bunched together, constantly fighting over borders, trade routes, and prestige. By the late 4th century, Qin was already showing signs of being different. It had reformed its laws, streamlined its administration, and built one of the most disciplined armies in the region. It was not yet unstoppable, but it was heading that way. Su Qin was not a general. He didn't lead armies or control territory. He was part of a class known as the vertical and horizontal strategists, political operators who moved between courts, selling grand strategies for survival and dominance. Su Qin had an ambitious idea. Instead of letting Qin pick off the other states one by one, why not form a united front, a military and diplomatic bloc that ran north to south, stretching from the northern frontier down to the Yangtze River? This would create a physical and political barrier to contain Qin. It looked impressive on paper. The logic was simple. Qin could defeat any one of the other states in isolation, but against all 6 at once, Qin would face multiple fronts, stretched supply lines, and no easy victories. Su Qin traveled from court to court, tailoring his pitch to each audience. To Zhao, he warned that Qin's cavalry could roll across the central plains if left unchecked. To Chu, he played up Qin's ambition to dominate the Yangtze trade routes. To Qi, he emphasized Qin's potential to disrupt coastal trade. Piece by piece, he got commitments. Yan, Zhao, Han, Wei, Qi, and Chu agreed to a formal alliance. On paper, it was an impressive coalition. The agreement was mutual defense. If any member was attacked by Qin, all others would come to its aid. In theory, this meant Qin could not fight a limited war. Every action against one kingdom would trigger a larger conflict. The ink on the agreement was barely dry before the problems started. First, leadership. Which state would coordinate the alliance's strategy? Chu was the largest in land and population, but Qi was wealthier. Zhao was central and could move troops quickly, but Han and Wei controlled critical passes. No one wanted to follow orders from a rival, and no one could impose discipline without alienating the others. Second, commitment. In practice, each state still prioritized its own borders and short-term security over alliance obligations. Sending troops to help a neighbor meant leaving your own frontier exposed. That's not a cost most rulers were willing to pay unless Qin was already at their gates. Third, rivalries didn't vanish just because Qin was a shared enemy. Chu and Qi still maneuvered for influence in the Yangtze region. Zhao and Yan competed for northern dominance. Han and Wei bickered over territory in the Central Plains.
Qin's rulers didn't panic when they heard about the alliance. They understood something fundamental. In a coalition of weak or self-interested states, the pressure point is not military strength, it's political unity. Qin worked methodically to break the alliance apart. They offered favorable trade terms to some states, tying their economic interests to Qin's goodwill. They sent envoys with peace offers to states far from Qin's main invasion routes, convincing them that the threat was exaggerated. They targeted key ministers with bribes, gifts, and promises of personal advancement. The most effective tactic was to create doubt. If State A thought State B might defect, it became less willing to commit its own troops, which made defection even more likely. Once the first state broke ranks, the rest followed quickly. Some defected to secure peace treaties with Qin, trading long-term security for short-term safety. Others shifted to a neutral stance, refusing to join joint military campaigns. Without full participation, the alliance's military deterrent collapsed. Su Qin's credibility suffered. His personal prestige had been tied to the alliance's success, and when it fell apart, so did his influence. Qin was now free to resume its expansion, one state at a time, exactly as before. The vertical alliance failed not because the concept of collective defense is inherently flawed, but because the participants lacked the trust, commitment, and shared strategic vision necessary to make it work. This was a coalition of the weak. Each member feared both Qin and its supposed allies. No state was strong enough to lead decisively, and none was willing to make the sacrifices required for the group's survival. Qin's centralized government, unified command, and long-term strategy stood in contrast to the alliance's fractured leadership and short-term thinking. The stronger state didn't just win militarily, it won politically before the fighting even began. The lessons go far beyond the warring states period. In geopolitics, alliances without internal cohesion are inherently unstable. Without a dominant leader or a binding strategic interest, they're vulnerable to outside manipulation. In military terms, a weak alliance, where all members are vulnerable, is unlikely to last under pressure. It may deter an attack for a while, but as soon as one member defects or cuts a side deal, the deterrence collapses. The same logic applies in economics and business partnerships. Coalitions formed only because of a shared competitor often fall apart once the immediate threat recedes or when the cost of cooperation outweighs the benefits. Self-strengthening, building internal capability and resilience, is a more reliable foundation than dependence on allies who may not share your priorities. The Six Kingdoms didn't fail because Qin was invincible. They failed because they weren't truly united. The vertical alliance was a shield made of glass. It looked solid until it was tested. In power politics, an alliance is only as strong as its weakest members' fear of leaving it. And once that fear fades, the alliance collapses faster than it was formed.